the expert, Andy Katz. He joins us now. Welcome to the show, Mr. Andy Katz, TNT sports broadcast and basketball analyst. Were you unfamiliar, as most people were in the United States, with the two guys that ultimately went at the top of last night's draft?
Yeah, obviously I knew who they were. I had seen Alex Sarr play because he played on Overtime Elite. So there's some domestic games in that, and for them, played there 2 years. Reece Lachey, I had never seen him play in person, just highlights like pretty much everyone else. You had to go to France to go see him for the most part. This was a draft to me that mirrored 1998. I'm dating myself here, but that's when
Michael
Candy.
Good year.
Yeah.
Good
year. Michael Candy was the number one pick in the NBA draft, and 3 spots down was Antoine Jameson. So, it was a draft no one knew who should be one. Then you shoot ahead to 2013. Anthony Bennett was the number one pick. No one really knew who to pick one, and Giannis was in that draft. So, there will be an elite player in this draft. I'm convinced of it. We don't know who it will be. I kind of think Stephon Castle may end up being the best player in this draft. He goes 4 to San Antonio. But I know the way these GMs got, they love the upside, especially the upside international player. And so I wasn't shocked that Reece Lachey and Sarr went 1-2. But I think there's going to be a little more value a little bit deeper into the draft.
These players are. You talked about it being a bit of maybe a project, not what we saw last year with the Frenchman, right? That was a star. We knew about him in time. It was the height. It was all the things that went into it. Is that something that propelled this year's draft to think about how successful he was as a rookie, that these guys kind of grew up in his shadow, his form, and how they come into play into an NBA that's much different than it was 10 years ago when you came in from a foreign country?
Yeah, I think also it is cyclical. Next year's draft is absolutely loaded at the top. These two guys would not sniff the top 5 next year.
Wow.
With Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, those guys are all going to go 1, 2, 3 in some order. So it is cyclical. It is based on, who comes out. I find it interesting that as of now, none of the 4 first-round Frenchmen are going to be on the French Olympic team,
Wow.
At least not projected to be. And yet they could be one of the contenders for a silver. I think we all know who's probably going to win the gold. But they're going to have an outstanding roster led by Wembanyama, but they've got, Gobert and there's a number of NBA level players who have French roots who'll be playing on that Olympic team who are experienced and older. And yet 4 Frenchmen go in this first round here in 2024.
I want to ask you a question specifically around the French invasion and why it started and who kind of maybe was the catalyst. I think maybe Tony Parker. I want to ask you that in a second here. But first, where Tony Parker ended up going was the San Antonio Spurs. They go out and grab the number 1 overall pick last year, and now they take a player at 4 who you believe could easily be the best player in this year's draft. What have they done? How quickly have they got better? And what is Pop expecting to look like with this team next season?
I love the selection of Stephon Castle. I think he will be the best player in this draft. I'm a believer that, and maybe this is why I'm not a GM, but I think that you go with the best player regardless of fit, and then you figure it out. We see this in a lot of other sports. Sometimes you have duplication. But if you think player X is better than player Y on a given year, then just figure it out. And you got a tradable asset, and I think Castle is going to be the highest value pick. The one question on him was, could he make threes? He did that in the Final Four. But I also love the fit. Played for Dan Hurley, high basketball IQ, work ethic, and Dan Hurley, Greg Popovich. There's a line there. Both those guys. Obviously, Popovich, older, a Hall of Famer, that kind of level of coaching, winning multiple championships at the NBA level. You've got Hurley just won back-to-back championships in college basketball. If you can play for Dan Hurley, you certainly can play for Greg Popovich. And so I love the fit there. for the Spurs and getting their kind of guys, and they've done a great job, obviously, of developing players in the NBA. And also, the one thing Popovich had to do, and Brendan Haywood said this last night when he was doing some Spurs games, that he said Popovich told him that, they were having to teach, with a lot of these young guys. If you've got a player that's coming out of the current UConn program, you don't have to teach him anything. That player is coming in ready to play the game, and he's not going to be raw. And so that's what I think will help speed up this process for the Spurs next season.
Outside of the United States, and I was shocked to hear this over about the last decade, the most amount of players that have come into the NBA have been Frenchmen. But for whatever reason, last night seemed very Frenchman loaded. And Tony Parker's the first real Frenchman that I can think of that, when everybody has a player. Michael Jordan was that for so many that made them want to get into basketball, or Ken Griffey Jr. into baseball. In the country of France, Tony Parker may have been that catalyst for, let's say, this group of players that are coming out here now. They're all around 19, 20 years old and, making their way to the United States to play in the NBA.
Yeah, and I do think that, and think of like Ronny Turioff, who played with the Lakers, played at Gonzaga. You're familiar with that school up in the Northwest. So he played in the States first, but he's a French national. So this has been going on for quite some time. I mean, Parker is sort of the biggest name.
Yeah.
But they've got, a ton of talent. I mean, I thought I got to give, while we were not on the air and watching ESPN's coverage, I thought Jonathan Givony made a good point on ESPN about, the diversity in France now is you're seeing it on the athletic fields, whether it's, obviously in basketball and soccer. The country certainly has changed in its demographics, and we're seeing it play out, in the diverse players that are coming through there. And there's no question that France, I think, will be a basketball power for years to come. Are they going to take over the U.S. at the Olympics? Probably not, but they're certainly going to be a contender. I mean, think about this. In the 90s and early 2000s, Argentina, was one of the main competitors for the U.S., in the Olympics. And then there just wasn't that flow of players to continue, after that Ginobili era of Argentinian players. And so they've not been able to sustain it.
Yeah.
Let's see if Spain can sustain it. I'm questioning that too after that Pau Gasol era in Spain, but it does look like France could sustain it. I mean, I go way back, Lithuania. If you remember, they had some great teams, at the global stage, but they also weren't able to sustain it. There was not really with Germany, same thing. France seems like the country right now, and Canada, by the way, that I think have the ability to stay at the high level on the international stage.
All right. What did the Lakers get when they got Dalton Connect? Big Sky to the SEC dominant there at Tennessee. He was 23 years old. I think that was one of the bigger complaints about something. I also heard, listening to Frank Isola coming into the office today, how that's a positive, though. I mean, all the experience you have going into a team that has so much experience.
Yeah, I thought if you're going to look at the playoff teams that I thought were the big winners last night, the top two for me were Minnesota and the Lakers. Minnesota gets Rob Dillingham in a trade, and they get Terrence Shannon Jr., who is 23 as well. He only slid because of his legal issues, wasn't able to sort of be free and clear until early June. Once he was, you knew that he was going to probably move up. He didn't move up as much as I thought he should have, but he is a ready, as Brendan Haywood was saying last night, plug and play guy. He can come right in, and we're going to see dunks the way Ant-Man has. We're going to see that from Shannon. So there's a 23-year-old who's going to help them. The Lakers, same deal. Dalton Connect slides to 17. They want to win now. Well, you don't win now with a guy you try to develop.
Yeah.
JJ Redick, I think, will love coaching Dalton Connect because he's got that same basketball IQ. He can defend. He can block shots. I think he's a big-time scorer. We saw in that Elite Eight matchup against Purdue. But also, I think with LeBron's going to want to trust a player on the wing when he gets doubled or whatever happens where he's got to give it up. If he's kicking it out to Connect's going to make that shot. And he will have the confidence to do that as a 23-year-old who's done it at an elite level, whether it was at Northern Colorado, where no one knew who he was, or at Tennessee and leading his team to the Elite Eight. So I love those two guys who are both 23, Shannon and Connect, having an immediate impact on playoff teams.
All right, we'll let you go catch this plane here on this question. I think most people out there are going to be watching round 2, and maybe more people will be watching round 2, frankly, simply because of the big question around Bronny James playing with his dad. Will it be the Lakers? Will it be another team that maybe takes him and uses him as leverage to try to do something with the Lakers, or maybe even because of LeBron not signing his extension yet and opting in? Who knows? I think there's a lot of intrigue tonight because of Bronny James and the LeBron James family tonight in round 2.
Well, so I'm going to piggyback off my comment about Connect. I think because they took Connect, it makes it much more palatable to take Bronny James. If the Lakers had taken a player that needed to be developed or a bit of a project at 17, then it's kind of hard to justify taking someone similar at 55. Now you've got your guy who can be in the rotation at 17. You can take a flyer, happens to be the son of your Hall of Fame player, but you can take him at 55, and that's okay because at 55 you're not expecting to get a rotation guy. But I didn't think that both of their picks could be guys that needed to be developed. Now you've got one. Now it's gravy. You take him to 55, okay, whatever. Let's see if he can develop into a player. It's fine. So I think they now have the luxury to take him, and I think they will, and I think that's probably the only team that would late in the second round.
Well, you answered my question on the way out. If it wasn't the Lakers, then who was it? So Lakers are bust for Bronny James and his pops, rolling into the sunset years for LeBron in L.A., I guess, retirement. Yeah, with this. I mean, how cool is that? I watched Ken Griffey Jr. and his dad almost collide and make a catch the other day. Imagine playing with your son. I mean, what a cool thing. Hey, Andy, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you were rushing out of there. Really appreciate it. The education. I only watched one NBA game this year, so I'm ready. I mean, I'm going to go on NBA TV today, I think, probably. So, Andy Katz, everybody, TNT Sports basketball analyst. There you have it. Andy Katz educating me